As one of the few humans left wandering the galaxy after the nuclear invasion, Adam Kane was careful about keeping his true identity a secret. He was the most famous human in the galaxy, and he didn't want every 2-bit gunslinger trying to make a name for himself as being the creature who killed Adam Kane. Unfortunately for them, he'd already been killed once, and then cloned. And for Adam, once was enough. So now, he went simply by the moniker The Human, and his racial pedigree was enough to get him a lot of work, as either a bounty hunter, mercenary, or bodyguard. And although life for Adam Kane had gotten simpler over the past few years, it was still a challenge to make it through the day without killing an alien, or 2, or 3. Hell, you would have thought the aliens would have learned their lesson by now. You don't mess with the humans. Some lessons were more painful than others to learn. The following is an excerpt from my novel, Human for Hire, available on Amazon. I hope you enjoy it.
Is that him?
Cannon asked. Axa pulled the curtain back so he could also look out the window. He shook his head.
I do not know. He appears much too small, and too young. This one is but a child.
Cannon grunted.
Looks are deceiving. Garrus at the spaceport recognized the species, and he would know. He has been well beyond the quadrant. He has seen them before.
Axa still wasn't convinced. He studied the slim creature walking along the far side of the street, looking for further clues as to his identity. The alien was barely over 3/4 the height of the average Aryan, slight of build and with pale, almost sickly-looking pink skin. His eyes were blue. Yes, blue, and he wore a tight-fitting cap with a wide brim on his head. A set of goggles was fitted around the cap, resting on the brim, telling Axa that the stranger had come prepared for the frequent sandstorms in this part of an area. He was dressed in a tan-colored short-sleeve shirt that was tucked into a pair of blue pants with pockets sewn mid-thigh, a strange location for pockets. Around his waist he wore a holstered MK handgun, but Axa couldn't make out what model. He continued to shake his head, doubting if this was the creature everyone had been talking about for months.
You know their reputation,
Cannon was saying.
It would be wise to exercise caution.
The stories could be myths,
Axa countered.
Self-created to instill fear and respect wherever they go.
Cannon laughed nervously.
It appears to be working, although I do not think they are myths. As you know, they once ruled the galaxy. That speaks to a particular set of skills few possess.
Perhaps,
said Axa, still not convinced.
But this thing is so tiny.
Cannon shrugged.
Whether he is the one or not, we should still inform Jorvis. It is what he pays us to do.
Axa nodded.
You are correct. I will tell him while you follow the alien, but not too close. You would not want to find out if the rumors are true about these creatures. These creatures called humans.
While Cannon set off to follow the human, Axa slipped out the back of the building and hurried along the next street, dodging the transports as they hurried by. He entered another building where 2 Aryans seated at a table in the lobby instinctively went for their weapons. They relaxed when they recognized Axa. One of the sentries nodded upstairs. Axa climbed the stairs and knocked on a door at the top of the landing.
Come,
said a voice from inside. As Axa entered the room, he saw the gruff and solid figure of Jorvis Canera seated behind his desk. On the other side were 3 other creatures.
What is it, Axa? An alien has come to town.
Jorvis chuckled and waved a hand at his guests. They were all non-Aryan and of various species.
I should say you are correct. Please, my friends, forgive my associate. He has never been off an area.
Embarrassed, Axa nodded at the guests.
My apologies.
Then he turned back to Jorvis.
Garrus at the spaceport said this one is a human.
Jorvis and his guests tensed.
Is it the same one?
Jorvis asked.
Unknown. He has only just arrived.
Is the human here to reclaim the credits?
Asked a purple-skinned creature with ears that reached to his shoulders.
We invested much making sure your operation on Xanor was successful. The credits are needed for the next phase of the operation.
Jorvis smiled and waved an impatient hand.
If this is indeed the same human who has been going about the quadrant apprehending people like me, then recovering any stolen credits would be one of his goals. However, my raids on neighboring Xanor have been going on for some time. They are a major source of funding for my syndicate. The recent theft on Xanor would be just another reason for the Xanorians to hire an agent such as the human.
Jorvis turned his attention to Axa.
Where is the alien now?
He is on Hawfin Street. Cannon is following.
Then he will go to Yaffer's. All visitors go there. Inform Constable Linos as to the human's arrival,
Jorvis said to Axa. Then he turned and smiled again at his guests.
We will let the law on an area do to the human what the law on Xanar cannot do to me, and then our visitor will find he has made a terrible mistake coming to my world. For on an area there is no one more powerful than me. On an area, I am the human.
Adam Kane walked into the bar, temporarily blinded by the dim light inside. The place smelled of stale intoxicants and body odor, something one would expect on an arid world like an area. Through the gloom, he saw a dozen aliens, but actually natives, all staring at him. This seemed as good a place as any two. He suddenly saw stars and a moment later was tasting the bar's dusty and sandy wooden floor. As his mind quickly cleared, he recalled a split second before being hit as a boulder-sized fist slammed into the side of his head, coming at him from a darkened corner of the bar.
They do not seem so tough,
Bellowed a foul-smelling wall of flesh, even bigger than the average Anarian. The square-headed creature was leaning over Adam, his 4-foot-long arms built like tree trunks and arched at his side as fists clenched and unclenched.
Humans. No match for Anarians.
Adam heard someone in the bar yell out.
He is but a child, Kronos. It is not a fair fight.
Since when do Anarians fight fair?
The massive creature called Kronos bellowed again. Laughter erupted in the room. Adam propped himself up on his left elbow while rubbing his swollen jaw with his right hand.
I don't think I deserved that.
He said to the towering Anarian,
I only came here looking for information. I'm willing to pay for it.
Injury and credits, perhaps.
Kronos asked, pursing his thick lips.
We use J credits to make decorative ornaments for our females. They are so colorful and worthless in the quadrant.
Your females. Or the credits.
Adam couldn't stop himself from asking.
I see. The human has a sharp tongue.
I also have energy credits.
How much?
What do you know?
About what?
About Jorvis Canera.
Kronos grimaced as his massive head began to rock back and forth.
That human was the wrong thing to say. Mistake me not, I will still take your energy credits. But now, I will kill you first.
Adam let out a deep sigh while thinking. Not again. In the blink of an eye, Adam lashed out with his right foot, sweeping the legs of the monster native. For such a tiny creature, Adam had more strength than expected. Kronos toppled over, hitting the floor just as Adam jumped to his feet. Then a powerful kick to the block head that would make an NFL field goal kicker envious was enough to put Kronos down for the count. But the fight wasn't over. Adam turned to see two other Anarians with their weapons drawn. He almost laughed, seeing the panicked looks on their faces as they stood awkwardly waiting for the targeting computers in the MKs to find a lock in the dim light. They could have simply trusted their aim and pulled the trigger. But that wasn't what aliens did. Well, most aliens. But not all. Being an alien himself, Adam didn't subscribe to the traditional way of firing a handgun. He pulled his MK-17 hybrid from its holster and sent 2 quick bolt center mass into the Anarians. Fortunately for them, the MK was set on level 3, the stun setting, but still, it was enough to have an impact on the others in the bar. They'd never seen anyone draw and fire so fast, and so accurately, without relying on the weapon's targeting computer. Hands quickly pulled away from gun stocks, diffusing the situation. That was until Adam was struck in the back with another stun bolt. For a human, a level 3 wasn't enough to stun them, but it was enough to knock Adam forward and back onto the floor. Then 3 more hulking Anarians were on his back, pressing gun barrels into his side and disarming him. He was rolled over, staring up at a uniformed native wearing a satisfied grin.
I am Constable Linos. I am the law in this town. I was informed that an alien with an attitude had arrived, one seeking to cause trouble.
Linos looked over at the still unconscious Kronos and then at the 2 stunned natives near the bar.
I see the information was correct. You are under arrest with charges to be tallied later.
Adam was jerked to his feet, lost in a sea of 8-foot-tall natives who pulled his arms behind him and attached corded metal handcuffs to his wrists. From past experience, Adam knew the cords would be unbreakable, but the connections were vulnerable. But this wasn't the time nor the place for a demonstration.
He was asking about Jorvis.
Someone in the bar yelled out. Linos stepped closer.
So I suspected. You should know, alien, that Anarians look out for each other. There is no law in the quadrant except what can be enforced, and foreign law has no standing here. If you violate the rights of a citizen, then you will pay the consequences as deemed appropriate. By me.
I haven't done anything to Citizen Jorvis,
Adam said in his defense.
Ah, but you are wrong.
Linos said with exuberance.
On an area, even contemplating an offense is a crime.
You can read minds.
Linos looked around at the carnage in the bar.
I do not have to. Any sane person can see that humans are a menace to everyone. Now take him away. And human, you will find justice on an area is swift and final.
As Adam Kane was dragged from the bar, one thought kept rolling around in his head. They don't pay me enough for this crap. Not even close. After that, things went pretty much as expected. Adam was hauled into a police station not far from the bar and thrown into a cell with his hands still locked behind his back. He was hooked to a bar against the back wall as the three hulking deputies took turns pummeling him with their fists and alien bootjacks. It seems everyone had heard of the humans, and the Anarians were anxious to test their muscle and brawn on the supposed super being. Adam went along for the ride, moaning and groaning where appropriate, eventually feigning passing out, hanging limply from the wall. The guards unhooked him but left the handcuffs on. Adam collapsed to the floor, moaning as he did. Constable Linos ordered his deputies out of the cell and then locked the door, placing the electronic key in his pocket. He stood on the other side of the bars for a moment before leaving the observation room. Adam climbed to his feet and sat on the end of the single cot in the cell. He was fairly beaten up, and blood oozed from his cut mouth. His body ached in a dozen places, even though that was changing rapidly. He surveyed his surroundings. The Anarians were serious about their detainment facilities. The metal bars were solid and joined by horizontal members every 10 inches, reinforcing the vertical rods. The alloy material would be strong, even as it was smelted to local standards. Adam already knew the gravity of an area was about 3/4 that of Earth. What was known throughout the galaxy as Jurian standard. The steel wouldn't be as strong as it would be on Earth. Even so, the way the cell was constructed would be problematic. Next, he looked at the back wall. He tapped it with his elbow, surprised to hear the hollow resonance of sticks and brick construction. Most cells Adam had been in were made of concrete block, if not metal. He grinned, knowing there were locally grown wooden studs behind the wallboard of this cell. Other than that, there was nothing else of interest in the cell or the observation area outside the room. All he had to do now was wait. And he didn't have to wait long. Soon the constable returned with another native which Adam recognized from the file he had back at his ship. It was Jorvis Canera. The crime boss was larger than the average Anarian, more like Kronos than Linos. With the customary block head and yellow eyes, he wore an expensive silken overcoat of simmering blue and a long white scarf flung backward from his shoulders, forming a cape. He had an amused grin on his face.
So this is a human?
He asked Linos rhetorically.
They are much smaller than I imagined.
The native stepped up to the cell.
I am Jorvis Canara.
Adam remained seated.
Yeah, I figured. You got here fast.
My headquarters are not far from here.
Then I was right.
About the location of my headquarters. That you were. I operate out of the Tanis Fish Processing Center, but in reality I control the entire city, indeed the entire district.
You smell like fish.
Jorvis recoiled and then laughed.
Yes, I do. You have a keen sense of smell.
It's what we're known for.
Jorvis shook his head.
Not true, human. Supposedly you are a class of warriors rarely seen in the galaxy, much like the Jurians.
We beat the Jurians, so that makes us better than them,
Adam said with a grin.
That is true.
Jorvis roared.
I never liked the Jurians, and I have never met a human before. But after the recent upheaval in the galaxy, both races are now mere side notes in history.
With the Anarians destined to replace them.
Jorvis laughed again, shaking his head.
My ambitions are much less grandiose. You can keep the galaxy. I will settle for the quadrant.
Adam grimaced.
You do know it's not really a quadrant? In fact, it's not more than 1/10 of the galaxy. Hell, not even that, more like 100th. But you can keep calling it the quadrant, if it makes you feel more important.
Jorvis frowned and Constable Linos bristled.
He does carry a certain reckless attitude about him.
Jorvis said to Linos.
He is insane, that is what he is,
said the police officer.
The arrogance of his race is evident. But he is living in the past. The humans are nothing now, and with only a handful of them even left in the remains of the expansion.
Jorvis shrugged.
That may be so, but this one has been causing quite the disruption within the quadrant.
He emphasized the word for Adam's benefit.
He will no longer.
Linos pointed out ominously.
That is also true.
Jorvis leaned in closer to the bars.
My friend, the constable, will soon pass judgment on you. He has that right. And what he will decree is what I tell him to decree. The mistake you made when coming here was to assume that not everyone in this part of an area was allied with me. They are. By coming here, you walked into the very center of my strength. Here I am a world and you are but a person.
Jorvis turned away abruptly.
But now I have guests I must return to. As entertaining as this event has been, I now grow weary. The human is a disappointment. You may do with him as you wish. I will record this meeting as a revelation that the reputation of the mighty humans is but a myth, a fantasy, and that any past glory they may have once enjoyed is long gone.
He looked back at Adam.
I was so hoping for more of a challenge. Life grows boring when you sit atop the pinnacle, the master of all you survey.
Adam said nothing. Instead, he simply winked. The native frowned, not knowing how to take the gesture. It was not what he expected from a being about to be executed. No, it wasn't. And that was because Adam Kane had no intention of being executed. Linos returned a little later, his face glum.
I am in a quandary,
he announced to his prisoner. Adam got up from the cot and walked to the bars, his hands still clasped behind his back.
Of course I will kill you, or more correctly, I will have you killed. My problem is I do not want to waste the opportunity of killing a human with some mundane method, one used on hundreds before you. I need to make your death an event.
Adam laughed.
So you've come to me for advice? Sorry, I can't help you. Except to say this. I'm not going to die here.
Linos recoiled slightly.
You are not. Then that is news to me.
It always is for my captures.
And why are you so confident that I will not kill you?
Consider Constable Linos. I have been operating in the quadrant for 6 months, and I have made 19 apprehensions of fugitives or those sought by various private or government interests. Do you think that in all that time that only you and Jorvis have been able to catch me? Is your organization so much better than any of the others?
What is the point you are trying to make?
Linos looked worried, even though he was on one side of the cell door and Adam was on the other.
Ask yourself why I was so easily captured.
It was fortuitous. I came at you from behind. You were distracted by others in the bar.
Adam nodded.
That makes sense. If this were the first time I'd been in that situation. Honestly, I have been in similar situations hundreds of times throughout my life.
Linos laughed.
Now I know you are lying. You are too young to have had so many experiences.
I'm a lot older than I look.
Which means what?
Never mind. It's not important at the moment.
Are you telling me you intended to get arrested?
Adam's face lit up.
Bingo. Meaning you're right.
Adam said before the translation bug screwed up the word bingo.
That's exactly it.
Behind his back, Adam worked the handcuffs, twisting them at the connecting joints between the clasps and the braided cord holding them together. The metal was bending. Linos shook his head, scoffing at the concept.
Then you truly are insane. Why would you do such a thing?
Simple. When I'm in here and you're on the other side of the bars, you're a lot more willing to talk, to give me the information I need. And if your intention is to kill me, you'll tell me everything. Thinking what harm could it cause? That's exactly what happened here. Jorvis came in and told me where to find his headquarters. I've been on planet for about 2 hours, and I already know where I have to go to get my bounty. Thank you very much for helping me.
Linos waved his hand.
This is nonsense. Even if we gave you information, you have no way of acting on it.
Then you won't mind telling me where my weapon and documents are that you took from me.
He spoke loudly to disguise the subtle snap of the handcuffs. Linos was troubled by Adam's confident tone, but he wasn't about to give in now.
They are in my office,
he stated defiantly.
Northwest corner. There. You now have more information which you cannot act upon.
Adam bowed his head slightly, resting his forehead on the metal bars of the cell. He whispered something that Linos didn't hear clearly.
What did you say?
He leaned in closer to the cell, and that's when Adam reached out through the bars with his now free left hand and grabbed Linos by his thick neck. He pulled the huge block head against the bars, while bringing up his right hand holding a 3-inch long piece of connecting metal from the handcuffs he'd just broken. He pressed the rod against the constable's neck.
I said, "Thanks, now I can leave."
He jabbed the makeshift knife into the soft skin under the chin, grinding it in, looking for one of the arteries that supplied blood to the brain. All prime beings had such arteries, it was just a matter of finding it. Blood gushed from the wound, bathing Adam in the red alien liquid. He spit when some of it entered his mouth. He held Linos against the bars until the trembling body fell still, then he gently lowered him to the floor. Adam quickly rifled through the officer's pockets, searching for the keys to the cell. He'd put the control device in his pocket when he left with Jorvis, but now it wasn't there. Adam panicked. Then he looked across to a table set against the far wall of the observation room. A datapad was there, along with a rectangular device about the size of a garage door opener. It was the key to the cell, and it was about 12 feet on the other side of the bars. Shit, Adam thought. Now what? He grasped one of the bars and braced his feet against another. Then he pulled with all his human strength. As expected, the metal bent, slightly. But the reinforcing crossbars kept the opening from expanding enough to make a difference. Adam spun around and looked at the back wall of the cell. He knew from the layout of the building that this was an exterior wall, with freedom on the other side. He ran over and moved the cot away. He tapped gently so as to not attract the attention of the other officers in the building. He found a hollow area, and then using his body to help muffle the sound, slammed his elbow into the wall. The wallboard broke, a little. He hit it again, opening up a larger section that he could get his hands into. Desperately, Adam tore at the wall, pulling away larger and larger sections of wallboard until he had 3 of the vertical studs revealed. On a light-gravity world such as an area, cellulose material did not have to grow as tight and rigid as it would on a heavy-gravity planet, like Earth. And with lighter loads to carry, the wood was lighter and more brittle, almost like balsa wood. Adam slipped his shoulder between 2 of the studs and pushed. He was rewarded when the board split easily, opening a space large enough for him to crawl through. Next, he had to get through the outer layer of the wall, and this was made of native brick. There was insulation to be pulled away before Adam could see the inner side of the exterior wall. He stepped back and placed a solid kick onto the surface. Nothing. Then a second kick and a third. The mortar between the bricks began to crack, and 2 more kicks was enough to open a space about a foot square. That was all it took. The weakened wall gave way when Adam stepped back and then crashed his body sideways into the barrier. He tumbled out onto a concrete sidewalk lining a fairly busy road bordering the police station. A dozen Anarians noticed and stood gawking at the short alien who just crashed through the wall, now covered in red and white dust and lying on a pile of crumpled brick. If any realized he'd broken out of the police station, they didn't show it. Although they were surprised and possibly in shock, none of the 8-foot-tall natives seemed scared. At 6 foot tall, Adam wasn't that imposing of a figure, appearing almost like a hobbit to the natives. Adam didn't waste time. He was free, but he wasn't ready to leave. He sprinted around the side of the building to the entrance of the police station. When he was brought in, he noted the location of the doors and the layout of the lobby. He also counted the police officers he saw. There weren't many, but he had no idea how many there were in the bullpen or the side offices. Still, he couldn't leave without his weapon, his ID, and most importantly, the keys to his spaceship. Adam pressed open one side of the double doors and slipped inside, crouching to stay hidden in the visual shadow of the 6-foot-tall counter that greeted visitors to the station. An officer was on the other side, working a data console, and didn't notice the opening door. Beyond him was the bullpen where the rank-and-file police officers worked. Adam made it to the base of the counter and then slid to the side, looking around into the large room beyond. 3 other officers, 2 of which he recognized from the beating he'd taken earlier. This could be fun, getting a little payback. Beyond the bullpen was a line of private offices for the senior personnel. The layout was eerily similar to any number of municipal offices one would find on Earth. Prime beings, humanoid to humans, all had similar wants, needs and desires, which meant their buildings, clothing and mannerisms were universal, with only slight variations. It made working within the galaxy easier. Not easy, but easier. Adam sized up the competition. Besides the native at the counter, there were 3 more in the bullpen, plus 3 others who appeared to be civilians. They didn't wear uniforms and were engrossed in their computer screens. Adam would deal with them if he had to. His goal was the large office at the northwest corner, the office of the captain of the precinct, or in this case, the constable. Adam moved back until he was directly below the officer on the other side of the counter. Then, taking a deep breath, he crouched, firmed his muscles, and jumped. In the light gravity, Adam's human muscles were enough to send him over 6 feet straight up and onto the top of the counter. The startled Anarian dropped his jaw and froze momentarily, long enough for Adam to take him out with a powerful kick to the chin. Then, before the others in the bullpen could react, Adam braced his feet against the inner side of the counter and jumped, his arms outstretched like Superman, and directly into the back of the closest uniformed officer in the room. He was seated at a desk, and the force of Adam's body slammed him into the desktop, fracturing ribs and collapsing his lungs. Adam was moving before the native gasped his last breath. He was on the floor now, dodging between desks and closing fast on one of the officers who had beat him silly only half an hour before. Already, most of Adam's injuries were healed, including the cut on his lip. He'd let the Anarians believe he was hurt more than he was, having learned that acting defiant and semi-immune to such beatings only led to longer and more intense sessions. His next target was also one of his attackers. The native saw him coming and went for his weapon. Adam recognized it as an Mk-24, a mid-range model between the ubiquitous 17 and the more advanced 47. Adam had no idea what default setting it would be set at, but even at level 2, although it wouldn't kill him, it would slow him down enough for the other officer to join in. Adam threw his legs out in front and slid on the smooth, polished floor. He took out the legs of the much larger native, interrupting his aim. Even so, like most aliens, he would rely on the targeting computer. Unless he panicked. Adam had seen that too, where an alien started shooting indiscriminately. Alien aim was often atrocious, but sometimes they got lucky. Adam and the native now tangled together, with the much smaller human enmeshed in a forest of 20-inch thick arms. Fortunately, size didn't matter on a light gravity world. In fact, the lighter the gravity, the bigger, and weaker the natives. Without the constant pull of heavy gravity, plants and animals tended to grow taller but less robust. Bone density was less, and flesh often softer. This was the case with the massive Anarian. Adam locked a human arm around a matching native limb and pulled. A pronounced crack was heard as the police officer let out with an ear-piercing scream. He released Adam, more concerned with how his arm was now bent at a 90-degree angle, and not at the elbow, but than he was with the human. The next native lawman-like thing had his weapon out and aimed at Adam. The light in the building was much brighter than in the bar, so the targeting computer would have no issue acquiring a target. The problem: it would take about half a second to lock in at this range. That was long enough for Adam to dive to his right to avoid the first plasma bolt. He slipped behind a desk, which would disrupt the computer, requiring another lock once the target was reacquired. Crawling on his hands and knees, Adam moved between desks, hearing the last surviving officer yelling to the clerical workers in the room to call for backup. Out the corner of his eye, Adam saw the civilians running for the exits, not wanting to get involved. Maybe once out of the room they would follow the orders. But for now, they didn't want any part of what was happening. The officer was rushing between desks trying to get a bead on Adam. He fired again, this time without a target lock. He missed, but it told Adam he couldn't take any chances with this guy. He was either too scared or too angry to follow normal alien firing protocols. Adam came upon a table instead of a desk, allowing him to slide underneath. He pushed off a desk and slid on the floor, coming up parallel to the mad officer a row of desks over. The native saw him, but not in time. Using his human speed, Adam was up and across the dividing desk in a heartbeat. The two came together, a massive but weak creature against a smaller, but stronger and more dense human. Adam grasped the thick wrist of the hand holding the MK. In turn, the Anarian grasped Adam's hand with his left and lifted both his arms, and Adam, high above him. 4-foot-long arms combined with a standing height of 8 feet put Adam 11 feet in the air, taller than a basketball hoop. He dangled there as the native police officer fought to keep control of the weapon. He was yelling and growling, sounding more like a wild animal than a civilized prime. He swung Adam around, sending his legs crashing into the sides of desks. That's when Adam gave up trying to get the gun. His right hand was still locked around the native's wrist and unable to get free because of the second hand clamped around his. That still left Adam's left hand free. He flattened the palm and then sent his stiffened fingers into the throat of the alien police officer. The impact was powerful and penetrated 3 inches into the flesh, making a profound impression on the towering native. Both his hands now moved to his crushed larynx, dropping the gun and forgetting about the diminutive alien he'd been fighting. Adam fell hard to the floor but was on his feet a moment later. The officer was now on his knees, writhing in pain and gasping for breath that refused to enter his lungs through his crushed windpipe. Adam recovered the MK, and feeling sorry for his victim, placed a bolt directly into his head. The ball of white-hot energy melted the brain, which then quickly expanded, causing the skull to explode. For the second time in half an hour, Adam was bathed in alien blood, but now with gooey gray matter in the mix. Adam scanned the room. It was empty, although he heard a siren wailing from somewhere outside. His presence in the police station was no longer a secret, and soon every officer in the area would be on their way. Focusing on the corner office, Adam ran to it, bursting through the door. He looked around, finding his belongings sitting atop a cluttered wooden desk. With a sigh of relief, Adam scooped up his leather holster and wrapped it around his waist. He pulled out the hybrid weapon and checked the charge on the energy function. When Adam began his new life as a gun for hire, he modified the standard Maris-Kliss handgun to include not only an energy aspect, but also a ballistic capacity, meaning he added a barrel receiver and magazine holder for a 9mm human handgun. Bolt launchers were fine, if you had the battery capacity and weren't over 100 yards away. Adam preferred metal slugs to balls of energy, though both had their advantages. Ballistics could blast through barriers and had much longer range, but out here in the galaxy, finding a reliable ammo supply was the issue. On the other hand, energy weapons could be recharged indefinitely, their disadvantage. They had limited range, no penetrating power, and limited capacity per charge, but the supply of charges was unlimited. And that's why Adam decided to combine the two weapons systems into one deadly device. It was bulkier than either weapon alone, requiring modifications to his holster. But he liked the idea of having two weapons in one. And now, he wasn't about to leave the station without his customized handgun. Next, he scooped up his ID and the keys to his starship. He laughed. I wouldn't get too far without these, he thought. Even so, before Adam left the planet Anaria, he had a stop to make. Adam ran out through the front door of the police station, greeted by a gaggle of nervous and curious natives milling about, wondering what was happening inside the police station. The civilian workers had rushed out screaming, raising the alarm. Adam looked around for a transport. A car he could use. There was one half a block down, sitting at the curb with the driver's head silhouetted through the back window. With lightning-quick speed, Adam ran to the vehicle and flung open the passenger side door. He fell inside the overly spacious interior. Overly for a tiny human. Just right for a native Anarian. Adam placed the barrel of the MK against the forehead of the startled driver.
Do you know where the Tanis Fish Processing Center is?
He growled at the native.
What are you doing? This is my vehicle.
Answer me, or you're going to die in your vehicle.
The native crossed his eyes, focusing on the barrel of the energy weapon still pressed against his forehead.
Yes, I know where it is.
Get me there in 1 minute and you live. If not.
But it is 5 minutes away, maybe more.
Okay, do it in 2. Just get moving.
The driver turned his attention to the road. Most alien transports were controlled by a joystick set up on the left-hand side of the driver. Push the lever forward, the vehicle went forward ever faster. Pull it back and the car would slow. Then twist the crossbar to turn it left or right. It was pretty simple. The native pulled away from the curb and merged with traffic.
Only 2 minutes.
Adam reminded him. The car sped up and began weaving in and out of traffic, raising the ire of half a dozen fellow travelers.
There is much traffic. I am doing all I can.
The panicking driver pleaded.
Just get me there.
Adam was watching out the back window. So far, no one was following. But he had to hurry. People like Jorvis had contingency plans for situations like this. Once word circulated about what happened at the police station, the gangster would be notified. Then he'd be in the wind. They made it in 2 minutes, 38 seconds. The driver, who had been watching a clock on the dashboard, was sure he was going to die. Instead, Adam shoved the gun in his ribs and told him to get out.
But you said I could live if I got you here.
And you will. But I'm taking your transport. Now run and don't come back.
The native obeyed. Adam was out the door a moment later, his hybrid MK Glock 9mm in his right hand and the MK-17 from the police station in the other. The sign on the building was in an area, and so Adam had to take the driver's word for it that this was the place. It smelled like it. Adam didn't bother with the door handle. Instead, he used his right leg as a battering ram and smashed the 12-foot-tall panel into kindling. Two startled sentries tumbled out of their chairs at a round table in the lobby. They wore MKs. Neither had time to draw the handguns before Adam blasted them with level 2 bolts from the police MK. But then the battery pack was drained. At level 2, a standard charge only allowed for 10 shots. The officer at the station had used up most of that firing at Adam. A door at the top of the stairs slammed shut, giving Adam a target. He raced to the stairs and took the steps 5 at a time, reaching the landing 2 seconds later. He lowered a shoulder and crashed through the door before dropping to the floor and rolling. A purple-skinned alien was in the center of the room holding a handgun. He didn't seem too confident with the weapon, but it didn't matter. Adam took him out with a bolt from his hybrid MK. There were 2 other aliens in the room, but they backed away, holding their arms out to their sides. Jorvis wasn't among them. There was another door in the room and Adam ran for it, again not bothering with the handle. The soft wood of an area made that possible. The moment the wood shattered, Adam felt a burning sensation on his right chest. A young Aryan had just shot him with a flash bolt, but a level 2. The force of the impact spun Adam around, which brought him back face to face with the shooter. Adam had his weapon ready and opted for a blast from the 9mm. The explosion was deafening, not something aliens were used to. They also weren't used to having a hollow point slug tear into their flesh center mass. At this range, and with the brittle bone structure of the natives, the bullet exited out the back, ripping a 4-inch in diameter hole in the already dead alien. Adam didn't have time to savor the kill. Jorvis Canera ducked through a doorway and out onto a balcony overlooking the street below. For a split second, Adam had a clear shot, but he hesitated. 50,000 credits. Dead. 75,000 alive. Adam grimaced and holstered his weapon. Then he followed Jorvis out onto the balcony. The gangster was waiting for him, carrying a 3-foot-long sword that split at the tip like the tongue of a snake. Adam saw the glint of sunlight on the metal and ducked just in time to have the blade sweep by only inches above his head. Jorvis was winding up for another strike when Adam ran forward in a crouch and tackled him at his midsection. The pair easily broke through the wooden railing and fell through the air, landing on the hood of a passing transport, with the huge native smashing down on Adam's already injured chest. The driver of the car panicked and pushed the throttle, sending the fighters rolling over the windshield and then off the back of the vehicle. The road was made of a concrete-like material and was as hard as concrete. Again, Jorvis ended up on top of the much smaller human. Having been cushioned by both falls, Jorvis was uninjured and began pommeling Adam with boulder-sized fists. Adam was coughing, trying to catch his breath, and could barely block the punches as they came one after another. Jorvis had lost his sword in the fall off the balcony, so he reached for Adam's MK hybrid instead. Seeing the gun, Adam reached out with both hands and took hold of Jorvis's wrist. The big Anarian tried to cock the weapon so it aimed at Adam's head, but he had trouble with the added weight. Adam's senses cleared and his breathing stabilized enough for him to realize what he had to do. He squeezed the wrist of the native and pushed the gun away from his head, forcing Jorvis's hand to bend back more than it should. Like the officer at the police station, Jorvis let out an ear-piercing scream when his wrist broke. He dropped the weapon and held the limp wrist in his left hand, whimpering, looking at Adam with tear-filled eyes and then at his useless appendage.
You will die for this.
Jorvis spit through clenched teeth and quivering lips.
Not before you do,
Adam said calmly. He recovered his weapon and then stood up. They were in the middle of the street with traffic stopped in both directions. 100 or more Aryans stood gawking, not knowing what to make of what they were seeing. A tiny, hobbit-like creature had just bested their most famous resident, and he had a weapon. No one made a move to challenge Adam. Even so, he had to hurry. The ubiquitous police sirens were growing louder and seemed to be coming from all directions. He reached down and grabbed Jorvis by his shiny blue shirt. The native slapped at his hand, still wailing from the pain in his right wrist. He tried to crawl away. Adam had had enough. He couldn't deal with an uncooperative fugitive. Stepping forward, Adam laid a sharp backhand across Jorvis's face, being careful to moderate the power so as to not kill the crime lord. But it was strong enough to knock him out. Next, Adam took the long arms of the native and draped them over his shoulders from behind, before dragging the 8-foot-long beast to the transport he'd appropriated earlier. He opened the passenger door and shoved Jorvis inside. Then he went to the driver's side and climbed in. For once, Adam was glad the drive controls were in a joystick to his left and not on the floor. If the Invaders used gas pedals and brakes, his legs wouldn't have been long enough to reach them. As it was, Adam could barely see over the dashboard to drive. He shoved the control stick forward and the car shot off away from the curb. Working the joystick, Adam weaved between alien cars and trucks, watching through the rearview camera as a pair of identical gray cars followed him through the maze of traffic. These would be police cars, and they were closing. Using the stick, Adam swerved left and right, slamming into other cars, causing them to lose control and spin in the middle of the street. Chain reaction crashes followed, and seconds later the street, both coming and going, was blocked. The gray police cars were on the other side of the carnage. But that wouldn't stop them for long, and there were more on the way. Adam knew how to get to the spaceport from here. He'd done his homework, studying the maps as he planned the operation. Sure, it wasn't so much a formal plan as a general outline. He'd been on so many missions like this before that he could do it in his sleep. But exfil was one of his main concerns, a concept drilled into him decades ago back on Earth during his Navy SEAL training. Not much mattered if you couldn't make a clean getaway. Fortunately, the spaceport was only a few miles outside the city limits. Adam sped past lighter traffic on the main thoroughfare and was at the facility less than 10 minutes later. But the police were already there. A single car was blocking the entrance to the port, lights flashing along a strip that outlined the top of the vehicle. 2 uniformed officers were on the other side of the car, aiming Xanafy flash rifles at Adam's approaching transport. Adam didn't slow down, but as he got closer, he spun the joystick steering bar all the way to the right, putting the car into a spin. He corrected when the tail end was facing the broadside of the police car. Then he pulled back on the stick, sending the transport into reverse. He rammed the police car at about 30 miles per hour, or its equivalent in an Aryan measurement, deforming the passenger side and shoving the car back into the police officers. They flew through the air and hit hard on the concrete road. Adam didn't wait to check their condition. He shoved the control stick forward and spun away. His transport still ran, but barely. The back was smashed and the frame bent sideways, making it hard for Adam to steer. Fortunately, most electric vehicles had motors on each wheel, and although one wasn't working, it didn't lock up, allowing the tire to spin freely. The next barrier was the interior security gate separating the service facilities from the vast landing and takeoff field. It was a thin arm blocking the road and anchored by a guard shack. The guard was outside his hut, looking toward the front entrance of the port, wondering what all the noise and commotion was about. He watched as Adam's smoking vehicle closed on his position and moved out of the way a split second before Adam crashed through the gate. He raced off across the compacted dirt landing field, following a row of 10-foot-high markers indicating landing zones. The field was about half full, with a few ships on landing approach while a couple raced for the heavens on plumes of gray-white chemical jets. His ship was in spot something 98. He didn't bother learning the Aryan color or symbol indicators, only the number. But as he grew closer to number 98, he started noticing something didn't look right. He slowed, checking the markers. Then he came to a stop, slumping his shoulders and sighed. His ship wasn't there. The space was empty. He stepped out of the car and did a 360, scanning the field for anything that looked like his ship. It had only been 3 hours. He knew where he parked her, and there was no reason for the ground crew to move the vessel. A field service worker was about 50 yards away, sitting in a golf cart-like vehicle with a large trash bin on the back. Adam sprinted over.
The ship in number 98, what happened to it?
The droopy-eyed native looked at the spot.
It is not here.
That I know. Where did it go?
The maintenance tech looked up and pointed.
It lifted.
Who took it?
I do not know. I would say the owners took it.
I'm the owner.
The native looked genuinely surprised.
Then it appears your ship has been stolen. Perhaps you should link to Constable Linus.
The native didn't seem fazed by Adam's blood-soaked shirt with the perfect circle burned into the right of his chest, the result of the level 2 bolt. Adam didn't have the heart to tell the worker that some of the blood was that of Constable Linus. But now Adam had a major problem. He was about a mile into the spaceport and with no ship to get off-world. and with a couple of dozen angry 8-foot-tall police officers racing to get to him. Adam shrugged. The solution was simple. He needed to steal a ship. This has been an excerpt from my book, Human for Hire, the first book in the Human for Hire series by T.R. Harris. You can continue the adventure by checking out the novel and series on Amazon. The links below are in the channel description. More passages from within this book, and many others, are posted on my channel on a regular basis. Be sure to check back often to see all the new HFY sci-fi adventures I'm premiering. Also, you can find all my 70+ novels on Amazon or by going to my website at bytrharris.com. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button. Your support is greatly appreciated. For almost 13 years, I have been writing HFY material, being one of the first authors to do so. Of course, at the time, I didn't know they were HFY stories. Apparently, I was ahead of my time, writing stories that portray humans as the supermen and women of the galaxy, the ones to be respected and feared. My goal has always been to prove that every person on Earth is a superman or superwoman simply because they're human. It should give all my readers a reason to stand up and pump their fists into the air. After all, the saying goes, humanity. Fuck yeah! All story material was written by me, T.R. Harris. The associated artwork and synthetic voices were created through AI. Copyright by Tom Harris Creations, LLC.